Hello, I'm Matt Bergman, and you are listening to the Punk Rock Libertarians podcast, episode 285. I'm here tonight with Jared Schneiderman,
Hey guys.
Philip Dashing,
What's going on?
James Babb,
Hello.
and special guest, Dr. Joe Jorgensen.
Hey.
Joe,
Right.
Joe is the presidential nominee of the Libertarian Party, and it's been a crazy ride. But let's talk about your background for a second. You're not exactly new to this game at all. You've been a libertarian since like 1980, has it?
Yeah, 79 was my first meeting. So the first presidential, the first time I ever voted for president was 1980, and I voted for Ed Clark. And then shortly after that, so then when I moved to South Carolina, I organized the Greenville County chair, or the Greenville County, and so I was Greenville County chair, and then later I became state vice chair. I was also national marketing division, national marketing, some kind of position with national marketing in the early 90s, and I ran for U.S. Congress in 92, and then I was the VP nominee for Harry Brown in 96.
Yeah, Harry Brown, he's just somebody who most libertarians, actually, I can't think of a libertarian that doesn't have just great respect for Harry Brown. He was just totally awesome.
Well, he had two things. First of all, he had gravitas. You could see him as president. You know, he just, when you met him in person, he just acted very presidential. And secondly, he had the message that I like, which is principled and practical. He followed the libertarian platform. He didn't sell out. He didn't sacrifice anything. And yet he presented it in a way that the American people said, well, you know what? That makes sense.
It made it made sense to me around 1996, I think, when I saw him on C-SPAN late at night one night, flipping between the three channels that I had, or four channels, and some guy's running for president, and he was talking about legalizing drugs and ending the foreign interventions. I'm like, wait a minute. A presidential candidate can agree with me on stuff? I had no idea. What the hell is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably spilled your bong water. So I think one of the things that you have in common with Harry Brown, I think, is that you were very principled while at the same time very pragmatic. And it's like, it's just so awesome because like I can't imagine another candidate unifying the party the way that you have. You know, because you've got like diehard anarchists that are all about you, while at the same time you've got like pragmatic people that are all about you. And I mean, that's just really something special. I can't think of another candidate who would have been able to do this.
Yeah, and I'm not much of a Facebook person, but I saw a Facebook exchange in which Daryl Perry was saying he was supporting me, and whoever it was who wrote the Facebook post said, "What? You're supporting the Pragmatic Caucus's person? Well, I'm going to have to look into this person." But really, it makes sense because in order to get freedom, in order to get everything we want on our plank, we have to go out and convince Americans it is in their best interest to vote for us. And, you know, I'm one of these people. I'm here because I just love freedom. I don't like the idea of the government just telling everybody what to do. But I really think that most of the people who feel like that are already in the party. So now we have to start to sell it, you know. And like you said that you were up late watching CNN, and hey, this guy is talking about something that you agree with. That was my experience when I heard it was Honey Lanham that I heard on a Dallas radio show. And when she was talking, my thought was, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who thinks like this. This is great. But the rest of the people, if they thought like us, they would be here. So now we have to show them how our way of doing things is what's best for them. And I don't mean sell it like, you know, it slices, it dices, but to really explain how, yes, we do have the best product.
Right on.
So the primary was like pretty intense.
Yes.
Be honest, like, did you think that you were going to win the entire time, or?
Well,
You mean the nominating convention, not a primary, just to be clear, right?
No, I was just talking about the primary in general, like all the debates and stuff.
Like January, February, March, like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I always thought I had a chance, and I think maybe I came in a little too confident in the beginning. I had somebody say, "Oh my gosh, you're great. You don't need to practice. We'll just drop you in and you'll be in first place." And it turns out I was a little rusty and I needed to work a little harder. It was kind of frustrating that in most of the polls, I wasn't coming in first place. But these polls were also non-libertarians, people not in the party, people who weren't delegates. So we weren't really getting an accurate vote the entire time. So, and in the back of my mind, I thought, yeah, I think we can do this.
So what have you been up to since 1996? Wait, when you were Harry Brown's VP?
So I really wanted to run in 2000, but Harry Brown was running again, and he was such a great candidate that I was like, no, not going to run. So I did attend the 2000 convention, and I actually nominated the VP candidate who won. It was Art Olivier who won the nominee position for Harry Brown. And then I did mostly background work. Like I said, once you're the VP candidate, there's really not much more that's more, that you've got a spotlight on. So, I attended executive committee meetings. And something that I really haven't talked a lot about is that I actually went back to, in like 2009, I went back to the person who helped me get the VP slot. And I said, hey, I think I'd like to run for the presidential nomination in 2012. I always wanted to. I just couldn't. Either Harry was running like the first time, or I just had too much going on with my career. So I gave him a call and I said, yeah, I'm thinking of running for president. Can you help me out again? And so we had a few meetings. Well, actually more than a few. I mean, I actually spent endless hours starting to prepare, reading books, getting my answers together. And then when Gary Johnson, and actually, let me back up. We both agreed at the start that if Gary Johnson joined the race, because there were rumblings, if Gary Johnson joined the race, then I wouldn't, and that I would instead support Gary. So when he then said he was going to run, then I just said, okay, well, I'll drop out this time around.
Okay.
And then, by the way, I did not, to be honest, I did not go to the 2016 nominating convention because I was, the old joke about getting more degrees than a thermometer. That's what I have. In fact, usually I don't even list all the degrees I have because it's just like, I don't want to. But I actually went back to school and earned another master's degree. And they had summer school. It was a year-round program. And you couldn't miss Saturdays. Like if you missed, like classes in the summer were on Saturday. And if you missed 2 classes, you automatically failed the class. So I didn't want to use one of my Saturday freebies in the beginning and go to the nominating convention. So then I went back again in 2018 and was at that nominating convention.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? Like, what are your next goals as we get closer and closer to November?
Well, to spread the word as much as we can. Right now, we're revamping the website. We're going to put a landing page there so that we have a transition, because the website, and let me just mention, I've got to give a shout out to Steve Dasbach, my campaign manager, who was the national chair in the 90s when I ran for VP. And also Joe Houtman, my campaign chair, and then Stuart Flood, who was everything else in the campaign. And we just had such a small campaign team that, we didn't have the big fancy brochures and the big fancy website. We were hoping that my message would be enough to get voters to vote for us. And, the donors, when they mailed in their contributions, they said, well, we want you to spend the money on this or that. Nobody really wanted us to spend money on any kind of web design. So the web design got us to the nomination, but it's not ready for prime time. It's not ready to go on to the next step. So, and we are working with national. I would like to point out one thing that's going to be a lot different about my campaign from the last 3 campaigns is we are going to be integrated with national headquarters. And we just had like a 2-hour meeting today when we talked about how we were going to coordinate our schedules and how we're going to upgrade my website to where it's something that kind of fits in with the motif of the Libertarian Party headquarters. Because, and again, I want to make it clear, I was a Gary Johnson supporter. As I said, I decided not to run because he was. But I did have a problem with the outside Republican consultants who came in and helped his campaign, because they basically left with the money and the mailing lists and all that. And we're not going to do that. We are going to share data real time with national, and they're going to get those names to the different states and the different down ballot candidates. Right. And let me point out, and I don't think it was Gary Johnson's fault. I think it was the people who were running, the behind the scenes people. And they said, sure, we'll give you data. And they ended up giving some of the data like a year later. Well, by then the election is passed. It doesn't help down ballot candidates to get the names and numbers of people a year later.
Maybe that's just a hazard of nominating washed up Republicans, do you think?
Ouch.
Well, I won't use the term washed up, but what I would say, what I've referred to them as kind of like a farm team in reverse. You know how Major League Baseball, you've got the farm teams and you kind of see who the good players are, and then you put them up to the Major League Baseball. What we get are the people like they've already been in Major League Baseball, and now they're on the way down. So we're like the farm team on the way down. And
that's pretty sad, isn't it? I mean, now let me ask you your opinion. And if would you use the word washed up to describe Bob Barr?
Hey, I know how to be a politician. I'm not using the word washed up for anybody.
Luckily, I'm not a politician.
Not even Trump, not even Biden.
Oh, wow.
He's not a has-been. He's a never was.
Yeah, this is really, I think Joe Biden is quite interesting, actually.
In what way?
As a psychologist?
Yeah. That's what I thought you meant, actually.
Like about his pedophilia, or what exactly is fascinating to a clinical mind?
And now you're bringing up all sorts of stuff I didn't know. So there's a law that says that psychologists cannot diagnose, cannot give their professional opinions about celebrities without ever having diagnosed them. But I'd like to point out, I'm not that kind of psychologist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. But no, I mean the fact that Joe Biden in the, 2012 referred to Obama as a clean, articulate black man.
What the hell?
Oh.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
And then he's the VP, and what good did he do as VP? And apparently, and now I realize that this argument is a bit specious, but I would go around pointing out, and let me mention real quick, the master's degree I got, a few years ago is a master's in social work, which is about the most liberal degree there is out there. And so it was kind of hard going to class every week. But what I pointed out to my fellow my fellow classmates who were talking about, oh, Democrats, such peace-loving people, they don't want to go to war. And I was like, oh yeah? Well, guess what? Bush led us into war against 3 countries, Obama against 7 countries. So there. So Joe Biden actually didn't seem to be as much of a war hawk as Obama did, but he still wasn't able to stop it. He
Sure.
just didn't have enough say.
So,
Yeah.
Well, what
Sorry.
about the kid sniffing? As a I mean, and I'm not asking you to give
What's
a
your
professional
stance?
diagnosis, but you've seen enough on TV. What's with the kid sniffing?
I guess I'll be kind and say maybe it's his generation. Have you seen that meme, by the way, that says Joe for president and it's Obama, it's Biden sniffing somebody, and then it says Joe for president and it shows a picture of me. It's
yeah.
just
That's awesome.
with the whole
So
thing.
you've spent a lot of time in the university system. What is your your opinion on the university system in this country?
Well, it would be good if we didn't have the government loans that drove up the prices. In fact, I had to pay for my own tuition when I went back to school recently. I was shocked at how much it had gone up since I was in school in the late 90s. I couldn't believe it. And of course it happened when the federal government started saying, sure, loans for everyone. And now, it's like the housing bubble. So, and in fact, there have been people who have been calling it an education bubble, and maybe it will pop like the housing bubble. So I hope not, because that's where my job is. But, they pumped it full of dollars.
What's even worse, because you can't discharge those loans.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then I think what makes it even worse is how it's that this education bubble is tied to the military-industrial complex, because they made education so expensive. All these kids graduated high school with no money, and they're like, "Well, shit, I guess I'll join the military for a run to pay for college."
That's an excellent point. Excellent point.
What would you say to people that are have suggested that perhaps that the bankruptcy laws should be changed to allow people that have too much student debt to declare bankruptcy, just like if they had got too much boat debt or housing debt or spend it on cocaine? What's your position on that?
Well, I mean, that might be a good first start, but that's not getting to the source of the problem. The source of the problem is we've got to get all of those dollars, stop having the federal government throw out all of that money so that the cost of education goes down. The problem is the cost of education. Back when I went to school the first time, you could work a part-time job or almost a full, not even a full-time job, and pay for school on the side. And you just can't do that anymore. That's the real tragedy. So I think it's more important to just get the cost back down to where it was in terms of, spending money.
And what could a president do along those lines?
Well, first of all, get rid of the Department of Education. A lot of people don't realize that. Yeah, we hear about the Department of Education when it comes to like classrooms, elementary school, high school, but actually the Department of Education does have something to do with student loans. And I've been saying all along, I want to get rid of the Department of Education. That we've had it for 40 years. Education hasn't gotten better, it's gotten worse. So that's one of the things. But we just got to cut basically across the board.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about the Department of Education, you spend a bunch of money to Washington D.C. and then you get back pennies on the dollar. I mean, who's winning? Nobody.
D.C.
Yeah,
Bankers.
Yeah, the bankers.
Them too.
Now,
everybody sees their $1,200 now, like, oh, isn't this great? Well, but they don't realize that for a lot of people, the money came from themselves. And, it's hard to compete with Santa Claus. And I think one of the worst things that ever happened to this country was when they started having withholding. If people at the end of the year sat there and wrote a big check to the government, then they would know how much they were spending. And now it's pretty, not only is it not painless to send money to the federal government, but you feel like it's Christmas because, oh, they're sending me this big check. Isn't the government great?
Yeah, everyone focuses on the net to bank on their pay stub, not the gross.
Right.
Yep.
So, Joe, what would you say that your hot button issues are personally?
Well, personally, it's the healthcare system, and I really hate it when there are misconceptions out there. And part of the problem, or part of the reason why healthcare is such a big thing with me, is because there's such a misconception that we have a free market system when we don't. And also, now here's where I lucked out, which is that the topic that interests me, healthcare, is also the topic that interests voters. So we meshed up on that one.
Yeah.
Bringing the troops home, that's in my platform. It's not, like I said, healthcare is where my heart is at. However, bringing the troops home, we got to get everybody home. And then the environment. Now, I would call myself, I've always called myself a small E environmentalist. I would, I've got my garden, I've got my compost pile, and I recycle and all that. But I didn't say, well, I'm going to give up my car. I've never been like that kind of environmentalist, but that is something that the young people especially are really interested in. So that's why I've added it to my platform.
Those are solid issues for sure.
Yeah.
Well, except, libertarians usually don't touch on the environment. So that's a little different for my campaign. But, we've got AOC and all these other people out there talking about, well, I mean, now everybody's talking about the virus, but before the virus, they were talking about, which one of the things I would like to ask AOC, and by the way, let me mention, I have not eaten red meat in like 25 years. And we hear about all the cows and the methane gas and people snapping pictures of AOC and her campaign team out there having burgers. So I would like to ask AOC, hey, would you like me to pass a law to keep you from eating beef? Is that what you would like? I mean, of course I would never do that. And, I voluntarily don't do that. So
when those sorts of people talk about the Green New Deal, how do you sort of rebut that and then provide your own ideas?
Oh my gosh, that once again, it's bureaucrats deciding where the money is spent instead of individuals, because they're talking about, for instance, solar power and sun and wind power. If those were viable, then there would be a company out there, a private company out there, just raking in the profits. And if a company can't go out there and rake in the profits, then the federal government shouldn't be doing it, because it's not a good investment. If you wouldn't spend the money doing it, why should you give your money to the federal government and then have them spend money?
Right.
I call it the green leap forward, which
Yeah.
I mean, because you look into it and it's more than just like, we're going to use solar panels. They're like, and we're going to radically restructure society in our vision.
We're going to tear down millions of homes, and rebuild them.
Yeah, like, I've heard this before. Where was that? How'd that work out? Nah.
Exactly.
So you would say it's more of a property rights-based platform you have with the environment?
Oh yeah, you take out a globe, you look at, basically mark where there's big government, where there's freedom. You see that where there's bigger government, there's always more pollution. Where there's freedom, there's always less pollution. And again, especially the younger people, I love to teach about tragedy of the commons, which I'm sure I didn't talk about that tonight, so let me mention it here. I've mentioned this a few times, but we hear about people over in Africa and all the poaching going on, and how the elephants, people are going after the elephants for the elephant tusks, and the tigers, and how we need government to step in. But what people don't realize is that they're poaching these animals from either government-owned property, or at least property that's kind of out there in the commons, that's not owned by anybody. And the question I always ask people is, when's the last time you heard of a farmer in our country going out back, getting out a shotgun, and like shooting all the cows in the pasture? Like, wow, I had a really great haul today. No, they don't do that, because they want long-term profits. They
have incentive. Private property owners have incentive.
I'm sorry, what?
I say private property owners have incentive to keep things going.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry.
Yes, I was just going to say, so we need less government owning the elephants and the tigers, not more government. We need people who are going to profit from it.
Like Tiger King.
Oh my gosh.
Did you pardon Tiger King?
Day one.
He was removed from the state Libertarian Party. That's all I have.
No, it was just a joke. It was just a joke.
I know.
No, I want to know.
But you want to know what about?
Would you pardon the Tiger King?
Oh, I don't know enough about it. You know what? Usually juries get it right. Usually, not always. So I haven't looked at the case, so I won't make. I won't. Yeah, I won't say one way or the other. But
who would you be pardoning? Let's just say in a weird twist of like some kind of computer error, the Libertarian candidate wins, and
day one, yeah.
And it's day one. Okay, it's time to start pardoning. Who's first?
Yeah. So the first one, even though, as you might know, publicly, I'm a bourbon drinker, somehow, although I'm drinking water right now, but somehow I got through high school and college in the 70s, never having tried marijuana. I was a goody two shoes. What can I say? But the very first people I would pardon would be the nonviolent drug users. You know, I've been able to drink my bourbon. It's not fair that other people have not had their choice of drug. And by the way, when I teach psychology, I always point out that yes, alcohol is a drug. Just because the government says it's okay doesn't mean it's safe. In fact, I guess you know the old joke that the only way you die from marijuana is if a bale of it falls on your head. I mean, that's pretty much the truth. You can, you know, what, 500,000 people die a year from alcohol? Nobody dies from marijuana. So drug offenders, sex workers, anything that's adult consensual. Again, nonviolent sex work, of course, not, you know, not pimps and people, you know, not that, but the people who engage in it consensually. People who own weapons, who, you know, the charge is just that they owned a weapon that they weren't supposed to own. I would repeal all of the gun restriction laws. I'm big in the Second Amendment. I am a gun owner, have been for quite a while, so I would pardon them. Who else? Yeah, I mean, and of course the usual, you know, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, you know, all the people that we've been hearing, Chelsea Manning in the news.
What about Edward Snowden?
I'm sorry?
She said that.
What about Edward Snowden?
Yeah.
Oh, you already said. Oh, I'm sorry.
I thought she did. Okay. Maybe I just wanted to.
Yeah, we got too many people sitting in jail like Ross Ulbricht and the people you mentioned before. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, Ross Ulbricht as well. Absolutely.
You mentioned you're a bourbon drinker. What's your preferred bourbon?
Oh, I guess, you know, people have been asking me that, but I never said it because it was before the debates. But I guess now that it's after the debates, I actually get this bourbon you can only buy in Indiana. It's called Backbone, and it's cask strength, you know, where they have to write in the number. And,
yeah.
You know, it never occurred to me, I don't know why I didn't think of this before, that when you go to the liquor store and it's like 80 proof, 100 proof, whatever, like, how is it exactly that proof? Oh, it's because they add water. It never occurred to me. So this is stuff they don't add water to. So the stuff I usually get is like about 115 proof.
Oh, wow.
Good
Nice.
stuff.
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Very cool.
So, Joe, what's your take on George Floyd and the goings on in Minneapolis right now?
Well, of course it's tragic. It makes me sick just to watch the tape. Now here's the thing: the Minneapolis, or the police department immediately fired them, and it looks like they're going to investigate and bring them to trial, which I hope they do. However, I noticed that Trump sent in some people at the federal level. I'm not sure that that's necessary yet, because I don't want the federal government involved everywhere, because it looks like they were doing everything that they should have been doing at a state and local level. You know, only if they're not getting their job done do I think you need to involve the government. Because
have the murderers been arrested?
I'm sorry? Have
the murderers of George Floyd been arrested?
Oh, I haven't kept up with the news today. I've been on, have they not?
Well, I'm saying no,
they have not.
If the local authorities have done what they're supposed to do, then these suspects that are all seen on video murdering a man should be in custody, right?
Yeah, well, my understanding from what I've seen with police investigations, usually they don't put the murderers in jail right away. Usually they start to build a case because, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but a lot of times when they bring people in early, then they find a way to get out. So what their strategy is to build a little bit of a case, so that way when they get them in, they can keep them in. So I would have to look into that some more.
Didn't President Trump in a speech not that long ago, when he had a bunch of police, he was addressing like a police union or something, and he told them not to worry about hurting suspects during an arrest. Didn't he specifically say that?
Oh, that was a couple of years ago. He was saying,
yeah, that was during his campaign. That was
if you hit their head on the, he said something like, if you hit their head on the car door, you know, don't worry about it, or something along those lines.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, he didn't care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that does sound familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe there's
Unfortunately.
a culture of this, and Minneapolis. Remember, there was a Twin Cities wild shooting a couple years ago as well.
Yeah, wasn't that the place where a policeman killed that bride, where she called somebody? If I remember correctly, it was also in that place where she called a suspicious.
Yes, you're right.
Remember that?
Yes, that was. I believe that was Minneapolis. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you got to start wondering if maybe there's a culture going on that is not good.
Now, I saw a picture of that murdering cop wearing a hat. Now, it could have been photoshopped, but it said "Make America White Again," or
Yeah,
no,
it was
make
photoshopped.
white great again. It was "Make white great
yeah.
again." Was that
Dude,
photoshopped?
that was
Photoshopped.
fake. That was completely fake. That
Okay.
was disproven.
All right.
So
Who's spreading fake news
Joe,
here?
And so was his swastika tattoo, and so was
Yes.
The Iron Eagle. It is.
So, Joe, we actually had a situation in Maryland back in March. Are you familiar with Duncan Lemp?
who was shot dead in his sleep in a pre-dawn
that a
SWAT
no-knock
raid in
thing?
Maryland.
Yeah, was that a no-knock one?
Yeah,
Correct.
that was the no-knock one.
In fact, I got to admit, I was very proud of my answer in the last Kentucky debate when it was just Judge Gray and John Mons and me. And they asked us a question about, what's interesting is the guy who was asking the questions is a candidate in Kentucky. And he said he really didn't know how to answer the question that they asked him, what about no-knock raids? And, the other candidates were talking about police training and stuff. And I'm like, nope, it's probably drugs, legalize the drugs. We're not going to have no-knock raids. I mean, we shouldn't be having no-knock raids to begin with. But overwhelmingly, most of the no-knock raids are drugs, which shouldn't be illegal.
Right. It's to keep people from flushing a joint down the toilet, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
you can't flush a Glock down the toilet. So what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Because if it were the 1920s, they'd be having no-knock raids against bourbon. So,
Mhm.
if you legalize the substance, and you don't have to worry about no-knock raids, because you're right. Why else? Drugs would be the only reason to have a no-knock raid, unless you think that the person's going to run out the door. But then you could just surround the place. So yeah.
Do you think there's a connection in between Duncan Lemp and the murder of George Floyd? Both murdered by police. George Floyd captured on video and it's gone completely viral.
Mhm.
There's no video of Duncan Lemp.
Well, there is
video, but it hasn't been
body
released.
cams have not been released. Going on 2.5 months.
Do you see these as related at all?
How are you suggesting they're related?
Like as a culture of police, or as a state
I
of
see.
what's happening with police right now in this country, both seemingly completely unaccountable murders of people. And these stories are so frequent that it's I'm sure it has you as disgusted as it does us, but I'm just wondering what your perspective is.
Oh, of course. And I actually have, if I could put on my psychology hat, take off my politician hat for a minute. I actually spoke with somebody who had gone to training on basically training police officers. And she told me that this one and she's a psychologist herself, and she said that this guy who was going around training and helping to hire policemen, he said that you basically look for the same traits in a police officer as you do a criminal, but it's like somebody with the same tendencies, the same authoritarian tendencies, but they just happen to go on the good path instead of the bad path. And I found that very fascinating.
The good path.
Yes.
Good. We're good. Doesn't surprise me at all.
And that's what's sad, because I think there are many fine policemen who do believe to protect and serve. But then they're asked to enforce such, unjust laws, and it's got to make them jaded to the, to the rest of the community when they're put in that position. And we should have police officers who are there to protect and serve, to where they're not trying to, keep a mom from having her 4-year-old daughter play with the next door neighbor. And, you're just putting them in all these positions where you're just giving them kind of like the power of God. And I think it kind of puts them on that path.
So what's the libertarian solution to police run amok in this country?
At a federal level, and again, as a president.
Well, police are, I'm just saying, as a general libertarian position, because police at every level are running amok, from municipal, county, state, federal.
The biggest thing is to get rid of those laws, because if you look at, they're arresting people for drugs, for prostitution, for a lot of consenting acts that they shouldn't be arresting people for to begin with. And basically we've got, I'd like to go back and quote David Bergland, who was one of our, great libertarians who helped with the founding of the party when the party first started. And he said there are basically two ways you can deal with other people. You can deal with each other through coercive means, or you can deal with each other through voluntary means. And basically we've got a government in which everything is coercion, even something like charity. We want you to help the poor people. We are going to take your money at the point of a gun and give it to people who we think deserve it, not who you think deserve it. And so basically we've got a culture of coercion. And if we had instead a culture of voluntary exchange between people, then we wouldn't have the culture that we have now. And again, too many laws. If you've got so many laws, then you're going to have to hire more police to enforce the laws that shouldn't even be there to begin with.
Well, until the laws are changed, how about jury nullification?
I'm for it. Yep, I'm for it.
Amen. Awesome.
Yeah, and let me mention one other thing. I really, and I'm running on the Libertarian Party platform that the Libertarian Party, we would like police, courts, and military. And I don't want to get into who owns the roads, because then the average voter's eyes, they kind of go, yeah, whatever.
Aww.
This isn't some debating philosophy club. I just want to know who to vote for, okay? So I don't want to get into philosophy, but I would like to point out that you look at all of the, if you look at neighborhoods, there's no reason why neighborhoods can't be having their own security people, as opposed to having a one-size-fits-all government if all you're worrying about are real crimes. And then you're in control of the police, not the government. But again, I'm saying that to you because this is a libertarian podcast. I would not be saying that on CNN. I would be sticking to, of course, my platform. But since you're asking me a general libertarian question.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
So tell us a little bit about your campaign. I mean, how do you plan on kind of invigorating the grassroots of the party into, because I know here in Maryland, a few of the people on our Mises caucus were trying to do a sign waving event for you soon in the future. Like, how do you plan on reaching out to like people like us, in the grassroots element of the party?
The Mises caucus was doing a what?
It's like a sign waving. We're probably going to get together and just go alongside a road and just hold up some Jorgensen 2020 signs. And
I hadn't heard of that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing we're doing, and our campaign actually had a 2-hour meeting today with the people at the LNC. And again, I already mentioned this, but let me just emphasize that we are going to work in conjunction with the national party so that the party benefits from the names and donations we get. We're not going to just, walk out the door with all the names. So we had a 2-hour meeting with National today to start, kind of joining together. And one thing we're going to do is we have to upgrade our website. And I know I got some flack for that. We were just hoping that could get us to the nomination. But, once I'm the actual nominee, now we can go forward with a more professional website. Obviously, a lot of this has to be done online because of the virus. I'm going to wait and see if I can get out there. I can tell you I am going to New Hampshire next week to file for the presidency. And what they're going to try to do is to get me there before either Biden or Trump and maybe get some media out there. Our strategy has always been the strategy has always been that if I do go someplace, that it's going to be, instead of like Chicago or Houston, it's going to be more of a mid-sized city where I would be making news, rather than a large city who wouldn't even cover me because so much is going on anyway. So try to go to the mid-sized cities where we can get some attention. And of course, social media presence and just trying to get the word out there.
Have you been invited to Pork Fest?
I have not even heard of Pork Fest. Where is that?
Well, have you heard of the Free State Project?
Oh, yes, yes, of course.
Okay, well, the Pork Fest is the Porcupine Freedom Festival is the annual summer gathering of the Free State Project that's gone on. This is the 17th year.
Oh, gosh. Okay, now I'm embarrassed. I didn't know that.
No, that's okay.
That's all right.
But let me just, I'm just going to take it upon myself to invite you. It's at the end of June, and the folks there would love to see you. And since you're going to New Hampshire next week, maybe just hang out.
I will. I wrote it down. I made a note. I'll pass it along to the campaign team. Yeah, when you said pork, at first I thought like the pig pork.
Understandable. Understandable.
Common
Well,
misconception.
maybe it's like kind of a Republican sense, like waste and pork. We're going to get pork, cut the pork out of.
Oh, that would be so boring. God, that'd be terrible. Oh, that'd be awful. We gotta come here. We're gonna all get together and talk about a 3% reduction in blank. Like,
yeah, it actually stands for the Porcupine Freedom Festival.
right.
Well, that's awesome. So I will pass that along. I do know that after the convention, I'm going to Freedom Fest in Nevada. I believe it's in Nevada. I think it's in Las Vegas.
That's a lot more mainstream and important, probably. But
Well,
we have more fun over at Pork Fest. So
Yeah, they're
Pork is
sending
pretty
me there.
righteous.
They've got a table, so
cool.
but
No,
yeah,
it's good exposure over there. That's great.
Yeah. But porcupines, that kind of sounds like fun.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So what else you guys got going on?
Well, we want to hear what is like since you got the nomination. Okay, like first of all, were you surprised you got the nomination? I mean, are you kind of had an inkling, you thought you might get it, or you thought you were going to get it, or?
Well, I thought I was going to get. I mean, I thought there was at least a chance the entire time. I mean, I don't know. Even if I didn't think I was going to get it, maybe I don't think I would have dropped out. That's not my nature. I've never been a quitter. Even if I'm the last one running a race, I'll finish the race. But no, I got to admit, when Justin Amash entered the race, we got a bit nervous. But then again, when we had our first debate and he beat me only 55-45, we thought, okay, this is a good sign. That, because keep in mind, even though he just entered the race, he hasn't done anything to screw it up yet. Because the more you talk, the more you screw things up.
Like, right. Ask Judge Gray about that.
Judge Gray was so great to me at the evening of the nomination. I got to admit, well, in fact, I think I said this on camera, didn't I? When he said, if I didn't say it on camera, then I said it to him personally. When he endorsed me, I said, I'm kind of surprised after I gave you such a hard time. I mean, every debate, I was just hammering him about that UBI.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, I mean, and finally, the last time I asked him about it, I said, okay, so to continue from the debate last night, somebody's making no money and they get $15,000. And in fact, the complaints I got, they said, well, you didn't really set it up. And I said, yeah, I know, because it was a continuing debate from the night before. But yeah, I should have set it up more so that people who didn't watch it the night before knew what I was talking about. So I didn't think about that. But I was like, and another, and here's another thing.
This was his whole concept of negative income tax.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, and I'm sorry. Yeah, I called it a UBI. It's
Well, it's the
There's
same. It's the same.
I heard there's a
thing.
big difference.
It's the same thing.
I heard there's some difference. I don't know.
There's
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a graduated UBI
Right.
essentially.
Yeah, there is a difference, but they're both, it's you're putting reward in the wrong place. But I gotta say, Judge Gray was so gracious. He did not have to endorse me. He could have just said, you know what, choose who you want. And the fact that I hammered him so hard the last 3 weeks, and he still, and also at the closing of every debate, I started saying, hey, Jacob's great when it comes to party principle, and Judge Gray is great when he talks about practical stuff. If you want both, I'm your only candidate.
But what about novelty headwear? I mean, you're really sort of the kind of like a dark horse in that area, and I'm kind of surprised you got this far without some kind of hat.
Yeah, hat or boot. Yeah, novelty headwear and novelty footwear worn as headwear. Yes, but anyway, so I'm not going to say anything bad about Judge Gray after he endorsed me when he didn't have to. I don't know if I could have been good of a loser. I probably would have been more of a sore loser. I don't know that I could have been that gracious. So
now after you got the nomination, I'm imagining that like people are hammering you for interviews 24/7. How is the mainstream media? What are you getting from the big names?
Well, so far, it's good because we've been doing local media. So for instance, I was on the local NBC station today, and they were very nice to me. And by the way, they were the ones who let me in the debate when I ran for US Congress. I'm looking at my schedule. I think I'm getting NPR up here soon, I believe. So that will be interesting. But Matt will attest, I actually contacted him. Well, you had messaged me, but I didn't even look. My basket was overflowing with messages. So I actually went there and sorted yours out because I remember I promised you, I said, yours would be one of the first podcasts. So I went through all the messages to find yours to say, okay, here I am.
Thank you so much for
That's
that,
awesome.
Joe. Really, it means a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I am a libertarian, so if I say I'm going to do something, I try really hard to do it. So, but I think you know where they want to put me on is The View. That's what I heard.
Do it.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
you should definitely do that.
Yes.
Wow. That'd be awesome.
So I've already looked up I haven't watched him yet, but I've looked up when Rand Paul was on The View.
Yeah.
To kind of see their little method, to see how they try to trip you up.
Yeah.
So
What do you think your prospects are of getting on a debate stage with Biden and Trump? Is that even a possibility?
Well, there's always the possibility. But here's the thing, even less than usual, I'm not making predictions because with this virus, who knows? Who knows if we'll even be able to get the signatures needed because we're supposed to stay inside. So it's such a wild card. And then, I'm the eternal optimist. I kept thinking summer will come around and most viruses, heat and humidity aren't good for viruses. And next thing I know, LA is closing up to August. It's like at least let June or July come around because maybe we'll be in a different world, but no.
So what are the prospects for ballot access considering this? I mean, are many of the states going to just kind of waive the ballot? I mean, Pennsylvania has required tens of thousands of signatures in the past. There's just no way to do that. So what does it mean?
Yeah, I don't even know, but I do know that we think there's a good chance we'll be on the ballot in all 50 states. We're going to have to work
without petitioning.
Oh, well, we'll have to see. I mean, there are people who are putting lawsuits forth, but I can say
here in Maryland, we're doing that. Well, we just filed, the LP in Maryland just did that.
Well, there's no way there's going to be petitioning, right?
Yeah, we just filed for the lawsuit.
Not physical petitioning, yeah.
Right. But some states are opening up, so it just depends. But, that's one of the reasons why we had the nominations done in May as opposed to July, so that we could get a head start on balloting.
I'm wondering if this could be a windfall for the Libertarian Party to not have to spend $1 million plus. Maybe they'll have to spend it on lawyers instead and paid petitioners. So
that's what I was going to say. Instead of $1 million on signatures, it's $3 million on the lawyers. But
wouldn't it be cool if everybody was like, okay, we've decided because of coronavirus, petitioning is stupid.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Turns
out it is stupid.
Hey, they extended the income tax deadline, so who knows? So
Joe, let's talk your VP candidate, Spike.
Yes.
We love Spike here, right? But like the past few days, he seems to have ruffled a few pragmatic feathers.
God bless him. Did I say that out loud? Yes, I did.
Like shirtless. What are your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, that hurt fundraising. And so because there are a lot of big donors who who aren't always happy with that. So,
such as, let's name names. Did somebody pull their contribution because he didn't wear a shirt? Let's shame them right now.
Yeah.
I will do that, right? Because seriously, if he didn't wear a shirt, I'm not going to give my donation. What a weak ass position that is.
Yeah, I mean,
Jesus.
if liberty isn't important enough for you to look past a bare chest,
that's going to stop you. How the hell are you going to compete against the establishment if one guy not wearing a shirt takes you off the sidelines? I mean, off the front line.
Okay.
I got to vote for President Pussy Grabber now, or the senile rapey dude.
Yeah. Well, first of all, as a candidate, I'm not about to attack donors, but there are different philosophies about running for office. And I'm sorry, I never really liked the whole joke idea. I prefer to take it from a more serious angle. So there are people who like the serious angle like I do, and there are other people who like the joke angle. And so you know what? I believe in individual freedom. If somebody says, no, we don't want to support a joke candidate, well, that's their choice. So let me just say that Spike told me today, because he drove up to Greenville today, we did a joint interview today with the local news. And he said, hey, I just wanted last one hurrah, because my people would have wondered about me going all corporate. So, but now, on board.
So he put his shirt back on.
Yeah. Sorry, you can blame me for reforming him if you want.
Well, Joe, I just heard Spike. I just heard Spike speak tonight on LPTV with you, and I got to say, he's so eloquent. He's such a great speaker. I think you really lucked out with Spike.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shirt or no?
Great.
I saw lots of positive comments. So, and I'm just glad. The one advantage of having the ticket that we have is now keep in mind, I did get a rating of a B with the Radical Caucus. And by the way, Jacob Hornberger got a C. So I actually beat Jacob in the Radical Caucus.
How did and what did you get points off for?
I'm not sure, but Arvin Vora was the only person getting an A. So basically, if you're not Arvin, I guess you don't get an A. But I just want to make the point that even though, according to the Radical Caucus, I did fairly well. Yes, my approach is definitely more pragmatic. So we've kind of got the pragmatic people and the radical people. Well, now we've got one pragmatic person, me, on the ticket, and then another radical person also on the ticket. So it's like both sides get somebody. But I still
Are you saying you're not a radical?
Well, no, but see, that's what I'm saying. That was my disclaimer. I got a B from the Radical Caucus. Here's the thing. Personally, I'm a radical. But I believe in a practical message. I don't think
your methodology is practical.
Exactly.
So you think your campaign will bridge those gaps together of the pragmatism and radicalism together?
Yeah.
I think so. I think it already has.
Yeah.
I would say that.
Yeah, especially because, keep in mind, I'm not Judge Gray. I am going out there saying, get rid of the income tax the first year. So I still have a strong message. It's a very strong libertarian message, bring home the troops. And by the way, you asked me who I would pardon. I told you the people I would pardon. I would also begin bringing the troops home. I would have a meeting with the Pentagon day one. Okay, let's start bringing them home. So when you say police, courts, and military, that's pretty radical to most Americans. But it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. And that's what's so frustrating, because what's radical, here's what's radical, is giving half your money to special interests in Washington who spend it for you. That's what's radical.
Some would say radical libertarianism is pragmatic, because we're trying to get to, pragmatism means we're trying to achieve an end. I find a lot of people that call themselves pragmatic are actually just using that as a euphemism for not libertarian stuff.
or moderate. I think that's they get confused. They'll say pragmatism is moderatism, you know.
Right. They're thinking like, well, we're like, or watered down, like watered down equals pragmatic.
Right.
And I think we agree that Harry Brown did not water down, but still came across as pragmatic because he's offering like real world solutions to real world problems with a radical idea, specifically, getting people acquainted with self-ownership and private property and the non-aggression principle. These are radical ideas. So I just get kind of annoyed when I hear about the pragmatic caucus and the radical caucus. Like, if we're still making these distinctions, I feel like some people just aren't really even getting it.
Yeah. Well, I would like to point out, I think Jacob would have called Harry Brown watered down because he didn't want to cut everybody off of Social Security on day one. But see, I don't see any problem with if you've paid into Social Security for 40, 50 years and you had absolutely no choice. I see nothing wrong with taking what your money was spent for and returning it.
I agree.
And I think, and maybe refresh my memory, but didn't he even have an idea of like liquidating federal assets to cover those Social Security payments? So there would be no more taxation or anything like that.
Isn't that part of the argument, is that money doesn't even exist anymore, really?
Right.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying too, which is that there is no lockbox. And so what we need to do is sell, and basically I've got the same list Harry Brown had, which is, downtown office buildings, water rights, mineral rights, the
West.
What? Yeah.
The West.
Unused military equipment, all sorts of vehicles. I mean, there's
on that topic, we do have a question. Would you sell the nuclear arsenal as recreational nukes?
Now we're getting radical.
Somebody helped me with an answer. They said, okay, if CNN or somebody's giving you a really hard time and they ask you, so should we legalize Uzis? And
yes.
he said, your answer should be, well, it depends on how dangerous of a neighborhood you live in. So I guess the answer to that would be.
That's a punt.
Guess what kind of, I guess it depends on what kind of a neighborhood you live in. But I mean, we're less safe now than we would be if we weren't all over the world. So
yeah,
that's no for sure.
Doubt. Man. Well, so it looks like we're about out of time here. Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been just so awesome. We're all so excited about your ticket.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. So this podcast is brought to you in part by Conversations About Freedom podcast, hosted by Moral Bob. We have t-shirts over at libertariancountry.com. If you type in the code PRL, you'll receive a 10% discount. If you spend $50 or more and you use the code PRL2, you'll receive a 20% discount. Until next time, live free
or die.
Oh, wait, 1 second. JOJ2020.com.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Do you take cryptocurrency donations?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll have to ask them. I'm not sure. I think it should be legal. I think we should have free market money. So not sure if we take it, though.
You want to?
We should, just for the principle of it. See?
No, to get the crypto. Seriously. Do it.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much. Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Great having you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a good evening.